Senator, thank you for joining us. I'm glad that you see the future. The debt is a real problem. I have 5 grandchildren. They're over the heads of debt. And you talked about very good things that need to be addressed. Can you be a little more specific of how you would address those problems?
With the debt, the national
Yes.
debt? So who wants me to be more? Well, look, the national debt is not... We have the federal budget, to simplify it, okay? 30% of the federal budget is spent on what they call discretionary spending. I mean, you can decide to spend it or not spend it. That's things like defense. That's things like welfare programs, food stamps. That's things like foreign aid. That's 30% of our budget. Can you hear it now? Yeah. Okay. The 30. These are simplistic numbers. I don't want to get fact checked by some reporter. Basically, 30% of our federal budget is discretionary spending. That means the government decides how much to spend on things like foreign aid and food stamps and welfare and defense spending, etc. 70% of our budget is what's called mandatory spending. And what that means is it's money you must spend. You can't decide to spend less on Social Security because people are entitled to what they paid into the system. You paid into the system, you worked all these years, you are entitled to a check of a certain amount depending on how much you paid in and how many years you worked. That is the driver of our national debt. The problem is that today we don't have enough people paying into Social Security compared to the people taking out. For example, that program was designed when we had 16 people working and paying in for every person taking out. And the people taking out when it was designed didn't live as long as people live today. And the result is that every year we have to borrow money to make up the difference. That's called the deficit. And years after years of deficits adds up to $18 trillion of debt. That is the driver of our national debt. I'm not saying that we don't need to improve the way we spend money on defense. We do. It is outrageous that you contract to build an aircraft carrier for $2 billion and it ends up costing $3 billion. That doesn't mean we don't have to reform welfare programs. We do, primarily because they don't cure poverty. All they do is treat the pain of poverty. The only cure for poverty is a better paying job. And people do not, none of our welfare programs do anything to help people get back to work and off government assistance for the rest of their lives. That doesn't mean we have to improve the way we do foreign aid. We do, although it's less than 1% of our budget. We can't be wasting money that's being pilfered and stolen by those around the world that use it for their own purposes. But the driver of our debt are these two programs, and they have to be restructured for future generations. Because what's happening is baby boomers, the largest generation in American history, is retiring 10,000 people a day. That means many stopped paying into the system. And now that they're retired, it's time to get their benefits back. But the result is that you don't have enough people paying into the system because that's the way the system works. It's your money that you've paid into Social Security is not sitting in a bank account with your name on it. What funds Social Security and Medicare is what current workers are paying in. The money you paid in was spent a long time ago, sometimes on other things that had nothing to do with Social Security and Medicare. And so the problem now becomes, how do you sustain this program moving forward? And the answer is it has to be restructured for future generations. And what I mean by that is what I said earlier. Someone my age, instead of retiring at 67, may have to retire at 69 or 68 and a half. By the way, I plan to. In fact, I won't be in the Senate, but if you go to the Senate, there's a lot of people over 70 still working. It's a good thing. The second thing that's going to, my benefit when I retire will not grow as fast as my parents' benefit grew. The cost of living adjustment. But I have 20 years to plan for that. I have 30 years to plan for that. The second thing is Medicare has to work differently. It can no longer be a fee-for-service system for everybody. And for my generation, they want that choice. People in my generation and younger want the option of being able to take Medicare money and use it to buy a private plan instead. We already have some of that through Medicare Advantage. If you're familiar with Medicare Advantage, those of you that might be on it. These are programs that compete for your business through value-added services and so forth. My mother's on Medicare Advantage. The point is that unless we make reforms like those, some were proposed by Paul Ryan. We can add to that and tweak some of them. Unless we propose reforms like those, these programs go bankrupt over the next 9 to 12 years. We don't know, but they do. And that's what's driving our national debt. We have to confront this. The problem is that in the past, every time we've talked about it, the press releases go out, Rubio wants to take away Medicare and Social Security. That's not true. You know who wants to take away Medicare and Social Security? The people that want to do nothing about it. Because all you need is a calculator to figure out it's going bankrupt. And the failure to address it means all Americans, including the people on it now, will one day see their benefits reduced unless we act. But if we act now, we have a chance to save those programs, leaving them exactly the way they are for current beneficiaries and people about to retire, but requiring from future generations some reforms. And even with the reforms I just mentioned to you, our Social Security and our Medicare will still be the best thing in the world. No one will have something better. But we have to do it. And there is no way that the next president will serve 8 years without confronting that challenge. Yes, sir.
What do you do, or what is your plan to bring in Black American and Brown American votes? I mean, after all these people have been told...
I'll repeat the question.
After all these people have been told for years and years by the forces on the left that people like you, the Brown, the Black American Republicans, are opportunists at best, maybe Uncle Toms, that they can't in good conscience vote for you. What do you do to turn around that mentality? It seems key to me.
Yeah, so the question is, how do we attract people to our cause who are in minority communities and have traditionally voted for the Democratic Party? Is that, in general, the question? Well, the first is, I think everything I've outlined today matter to all Americans. This notion that somehow Americans whose parents were born in another country, or Americans of a different race or ethnicity, they don't have a different tax code. They don't have a different regulatory code. They don't face different... We all live in the same country. I mean, one of the things we need to begin to accept in this country is we are all Americans. We are all in this country. We have to share this piece of land together. We have to save this republic together. We are all impacted by what's happening. I will say this. What the last 8 years have exposed is what a myth this idea is that the left and liberals are the friend of the people who are struggling to make it. It is a complete myth. Why is it a myth? Let me tell you why it's a myth. Number one, it's a myth because you know how many people in minority communities are dying to be a business owner? But most of them, many of them, disproportionate number, did not inherit any wealth. That means they have to start from scratch. Well, if you have to start from scratch, you have to compete against companies that are already doing the work you want to do. But those companies are really big. Those companies have an army of lawyers. They can hire lobbyists. And so if there's big government, they can deal with it. They may not like it, but they can deal with it. But if you're trying to start a business out of the spare bedroom of your home, you can't. And so we have no idea how many small businesses, many owned by single women, many owned by minorities, will never exist because big government has crowded them out. As an example, if you're a small business owner, who's going to lend you the money? Is it going to be the big bank on Wall Street? No. It's going to be the local community banker that knows the community and knows you. The problem is 40% of them have been wiped out by Dodd-Frank. They can't afford to deal with its regulations. And so these small banks either close or they sell to the bigger banks. The bigger banks are bigger than they've ever been. Who is feeling a disproportionate share of this impact? The people that are struggling to make it. And a large number of them happen to come from minority communities. I would add to that further, the numbers don't lie. The unemployment rate today is higher among minorities than it is among the general population under this president. What about poverty? That again is being felt disproportionately in minority communities. Our safety net programs do absolutely nothing to cure poverty. Let me tell you what our safety net programs are like. They're like if you break your arm and you go to the doctor and he says, here's a lifetime supply of Advil. We're going to help you. We're going to help you deal with the pain of your broken arm, but we're not going to fix it. That's what our anti-poverty programs are. They pay you money every month to make you more comfortable in your poverty, but they do not do nearly enough to cure it. And so that's why I've argued that we need to collapse all of these anti-poverty programs into a flex fund and make them available to states and local communities for each community to design anti-poverty, true anti-poverty programs that cure poverty at the local and state level, not a one-size-fits-all federal model. And the only requirement would be this. If you are receiving federal assistance to fight poverty, you must either be working or you must be going to school so that you can emerge from poverty and never have to rely on the government again. The idea that the left has is just to leave people trapped forever in that system, as if somehow it's going to magically cure the conditions that they face. And so this is a myth. This is a lie that somehow the left is the party of big government. The liberals are the party of more government, more regulations, and more taxes. And what that does is it freezes everyone in place. And I'll close with this. Look around the world. If you look around the world, in most societies in the world, it's the same rich families and the same big companies that dominate the economy generation after generation. Why? Because of big government. It freezes everything in place, and the people trying to make it never have a chance. Yes, sir?
You are an extremely articulate, energetic, bright, young, first-term senator. That reminds me of somebody 8 years ago.
Yeah. Well, let me a couple points. I think there's some significant differences between me and the current For starters, the current occupant of the White House did serve in the state legislature like I did, as a backbencher in the minority that voted present on numerous occasions. I was the Speaker of the Florida House. I led that institution both legislatively and also administratively. I ran it. And I never voted present because in Florida you can't. You vote yes or you vote no. The second point I would make is that the President did serve in the Senate for a couple of years before he ran for President. I will have served a full term as both a member of the Intelligence Committee, privy to the most sensitive information the federal government has at its disposal, and also an active member of the Foreign Relations Committee. The third point I would make is that this President has not been a failure because he was a senator. This President has been a failure because he has failed on the key questions of presidential leadership. For starters, his ideas. His ideas are outdated. His ideas are the ideas of big government. I don't care if he'd served 50 years in government. His ideas still wouldn't work. Second, the President has failed because he's a divisive figure. The presidency of the United States is not just first of all, the presidency is not just an administrative office. It is not just a bookkeeper. The President of the United States must formulate creative, innovative policies, must effectively advocate those policies, and get them passed. The second thing is this President is not just a political leader. He is a moral leader as well. He has to lead not just our nation, but our people. And the third is our President has to be an inspirational figure, has to be someone that can call us to a greater cause, rally us together as a nation. He has failed on all of those fronts. This President made the deliberate decision to divide and pit Americans against each other. He has made the deliberate decision to tell people who are hurting in this country that the reason why they are struggling is because one of their fellow Americans is doing too well. And when you divide a nation against itself, it cannot rally to the great causes of its time. And so these are major differences between me and the person who's there now. And I hope you'll see that in the weeks and months. Yes, sir.
Help us understand your view of the power of the Supreme Court, and secondly, the difference between your views and Jeb Bush.
Well, here's what I would say on the second question. Jeb Bush is my friend. I've known him for a long time. We've worked together and allies in Florida on many causes. I am not running against Governor Bush. I'm not running against any of the people running. I think our job is to go out and tell you who we are, what we see the future as, and what we will do, and allow you to decide. Because ultimately, as I said, I have great admiration and respect for the field and the fact that we have so many quality candidates in the Republican race. And I think as the race goes on, the differences will be there. I will say that I'm the only one running who I think up to this point has really focused on the opportunity before us in terms of the future versus the past, and the idea of explaining to people that so many of our challenges are the result of the fact that the world has dramatically shifted and our policies are still stuck in an era that no longer exists. On the first point, and the first question on the Supreme Court is an excellent question. The Supreme Court is one of the three co-equal branches of government. And the job of the Supreme Court, as designed in the Constitution, is to review the constitutionality of laws or decisions made by lower courts and to rule whether they are constitutional or not. The Supreme Court was not designed to be a super legislative body. It was not designed to be a lawmaking body. It was not designed to be a place that made public policy decisions. And unfortunately, that's what it's become. At least in many of the decisions we've recently seen. You have seen a Supreme Court that's basically decided that we know what's best for this country. The elected representatives of the people are not willing to do it as fast or as far as we want them to do it. And so through a 5-4 decision, five of us are going to decide what the policy of the United States should be. And that's what's happening repeatedly. And it is a consequence of appointing people to that court that simply believe that their job is to be super legislators, that their job is to basically supervise the other two branches of government and to impose their policies on us when the political branches don't do what they want us to do. And the result is a runaway court that we've seen today on a number of decisions, a court that's extended its mandate in its decisions. And so the good news is when I'm President of the United States, God willing, we will have the opportunity to potentially appoint up to 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices, depending on how things play out. And they will be men and women qualified to be on the Supreme Court from an academic and a legal point of view, but also people that understand that their job will be to apply the law, not to rewrite it, not to reinterpret it, and not to expand the Constitution beyond how it was written. The Constitution is a document of limitation. It was written for the purposes of limiting the power of government, not expanding it. It was written for the purpose of hemming in government, not growing it. And we have at least 5 people on that court who consistently feel differently. We have to change that.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. I look forward to seeing you again.
Great to have you.
for your division. Thank you for your division. We hope to see you anytime in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have a few quick announcements we want to make before we adjourn. We are not adjourned yet. Please step back down.
They're not adjourned. I'm messing up this meeting.
Trying to hold you for a second. We have a few announcements to make. One, we have upcoming events. Mike Ginther, Polk County has a golf tourney.
He's not far.
July 24th, Polk County GOP golf tourney. Forms are on the back table.
Thank you. Is that a high school, local high school?
Other events.
Still on July 18th, the Family Leadership Summit. We have 9 of the presidential hopefuls coming. It's a free ticket. Go to the Family Leadership.
And how many candidates do you have at the moment?
Only 9?
9 candidates, free event. It's a great chance to follow up and find out where everyone stands.
Let me say it.
John?
Sorry.
Dallas County Fair starts today, so come on out and enjoy the fair. Run through this weekend.
Any other fun? Monday at 9. Monday at 9, Iowa Star, I'm sorry, I didn't, the group, Iowa supporting Israel, Rick Perry will be speaking. Any other announcements to make? Okay, great. Thank you all for coming. Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses. And don't forget that we live in the greatest state, the greatest country in the world. Have a great week.
And, you know, ultimately, that's our role in our high school. The government just can't stop it. And that's what I think. I say this, we're going to reach a point in well, ultimately, the religious liberty is not just a liberty to believe whatever you want, it's the ability to exercise your life and your business, and especially those of us who are called to live our faith in every aspect of our life, and model it for others to be an ambassador of our faith in a way that should be treated in the government. We have to have the freedom to get that. Yes, sir.
What do you think the prospects are with the dollar?
Well, China's going to challenge it, although, you know, they're going to have some significant, China's going to, in order for them to become a global major, and that's China's going to have some challenges. That can stock market. The biggest challenge China has is, look at this, the most successful people in China, they're all buying American real estate. They're all sending their kids to school. If you ask them, they're hedging their bets. They're not the world won't be. Anybody can decide, I want to be the currency. The question is what the world will use it. They are creating an alternative to the world investment side. They're trying to get the world to back American. Well, the dollar's, I mean, everything's pegged to the dollar, right? And you know, but a lot of that is just perceptual about our perceived. We don't believe America's on the decline. I don't think the growth of someone else trying to replace it. But that isn't going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. We've had that president. We can get out of it. All the best. Martin.
Some allies who can get into
Hold on, I gotta hold myself. How'd you get back? Were you from here originally? Or? How'd you wind up here? Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Well, thank you.
Marco, another Kodak moment here.
Absolutely. Remember that? Kodak? Are they still in business? I don't think so.
Everyone squeeze in. 1, 2, 3, roll. 1, 2, 3.
Remember the old Polaroid? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the original.
They're making little pictures like that again.
I know.
now.
My daughter bought one the other day. It's like a
Yeah,
little
so did our granddaughter.
retro again.
Thanks again for the Social Security conference. Thank you.
I took one yesterday that's holding no license cover. Look at the grading play on the skateboard.
I have a that's one. Yeah, which is a Florida boat. I appreciate it. My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, guys, for having me. I appreciate
Shake his hand and you got shoved way over there somewhere.
Yes, you as well. I hope so.
Hi, Michelle. How are you? Likewise. Where? Oh, good. Oh, good. Tell him I said thank you.
This is the largest crowd. I've been doing this here for 8 years. This is the largest crowd.
Well, that's encouraging.
Can verify that.
I hope.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Look good.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they left lots of tips on the table.
They always do.
My parents worked on tips, especially my dad. He was a bartender. So.
Yeah, I make more money here than when I went
Can we
to
get a
school.
picture?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to send this to my dad.
Where'd you go to school for?
X-ray.
And you're not doing that, or you do that as well?
No, not right now. Keeping up on my CEUs. I'll go back someday.
And why is that? It's just the industry's not.
I don't know. I just want money. I work my Wednesday through Sunday. I love it. I don't want to do it as I can. So my feet go down.
Yeah, that's a tough part. Walking around all day.
That is the
Well, thank you for having me, Michelle. I appreciate it very much. Sí, claro que sí. ¿De dónde es usted, Claudia?
Soy salvadoreño.
Ah, mira. Yo tengo muchos salvadoreños que trabajan con nosotros en Washington.
Apoyo me lleva. Voy a ser voluntaria la próxima vez.
Se lo agradezco muchísimo. Muchas gracias. ¿De qué parte de El Salvador es usted?
Es en Salvador, vine hace 26 años.
¿Y tiene familia todavía?
Sí, primos.
Qué bueno, que Dios lo bendiga. Muchas
Sí,
gracias.
muchas gracias.
Felicidades que su hijo está estudiando. ¿Qué está estudiando su hijo?
Está estudiando historia, pero quería enseñar
Y se crió en Iowa.
Sí, él nació en Iowa. Sus 2 hijos nacieron en Iowa. Sí, uno de 8 años y uno de 23. Se llevan 15 años.
Se llevan 15 años. Bueno, mi mamá, yo tengo, mi hermana me lleva 21 años a mí. Porque mis padres llegaron joven y después me tuvieron a mí en el año 71 y después una hermana a los 40 y pico de años mi mamá tuvo 2 hijos más.
Oh, qué bien.
Eso es muy típico de las comunidades inmigrantes porque tienen que ajustarse después.
Yo soy la única latina que pertenezco a
Hay que cambiar eso. Hay que cambiar eso.
Sí.
Se lo agradezco, es un placer conocerlo.
Mucho gusto. Me voy a apuntar para ser voluntaria aquí en Iowa.
Muchas gracias, me hace falta soy, se lo agradezco.
Me llamo Claudia. ¿Sí?
Muchas gracias. No me olvides, Claudia de Iowa. ¿Cómo es el apellido? Steve. Perfecto. Muchas gracias, Claudia. Gracias. How are you?